Dallas Campbell. Here he is.
The greatest pleasure, the greatest honour being here.
So look, where do we start? Let's say, performer, presenter, lecturer, science ambassador. I mean, what do you call yourself?
I don't know. It's stressful trying to. I guess kind of presenter mainly.
A communicator for sure.
I really struggle with that word. I hate the word. I hate the word science communication.
Why?
Well, just because it's like we don't have any other sort of. It's just what.
Yes.
If you call it science communication,
yes,
then it makes it sound like special.
Yeah.
Oh, like let us communicate to you, poor people.
Yes.
It just sounds a bit arsey. I'm not a fan of the word science communication.
Well, I won't ever use it again. I'm sorry to have brought it up.
No, you can bring it up, but it's one of my sort of bugbears because I try and fight against that.
I
term.
understand.
Because if you want to embed science in culture, then calling it science communication implies that it's sort of somehow outside and we must communicate.
Yeah,
with you.
absolutely.
We don't get kind of art communicator.
I
don't know. I don't know why science communication has become a thing. Anyway,
you're absolutely right.
Yeah,
great.
That's kind of my thing.
I think we should end it there. No.
Good night.
But what do you have on your passport, for example? Presenter?
Television presenter.
Television presenter.
Well, actually, do I? Or maybe even actor still.
Yeah.
Do we have to have our professions on our passport?
Yeah, you
still?
do, yeah.
I think it says television presenter.
Right. A passport, which I may say has taken you probably to just about every continent on the planet.
I have been to quite a few places. Yeah.
Have you
Without wanting to show off?
Done them all 7 of the... are there 7 continents?
Yeah, I haven't been to Antarctica.
Okay.
But I've been everywhere else.
Yeah. Well, just as a little amuse-bouche for our viewers and listeners, here's a little montage of you in action.
Okay.
Let's take a look at this.
That's on top of the Burj Khalifa in Dubai. I was doing an engineering program.
Terrifying.
And there's a long story about that, but
great.
I don't know. Well, that was, I can't even remember what that was. It was a glider doing something about something. Oh, this is all about aeroplanes. So that's the Wright brothers glider, 1903 glider.
Okay.
At Kitty Hawk, where they first flew.
Yes.
And that other one was in a fighter plane.
Down you go.
This is a Mexican sewer. Unblocking a drain in Mexico
with a horse's skull.
With a horse's head, and that was in Australia. We were treasure hunting, looking for opal.
Yes.
I found an opal. There we go. This was south of Spain. This is amazing, actually. It's all greenhouses, all that kind of white you see. And we were doing a thing about growing tomatoes, and this was the biggest bridge in the world in China, which hadn't been built, and I nearly fell off it.
Oh.
And so this was in rural China, crossing the Yangtze. And I don't know what that is. That's the sun.
Yeah, it is.
That gives us energy. That's underwater.
And what have you found there?
A pearl.
Hey.
Pearl diving. And there it is, the pearl, which I gave to my daughter.
Incredible. But your biggest achievement? Celebrity Mastermind.
Celebrity Mastermind, yes.
I mean, that takes my breath away. How do you feel looking back on just a very small selection of your adventures so far?
Really lucky, actually, and it's been great. And, mainly kind of working for the BBC Science Unit for quite a while, took me to all these places in the search of interesting stories and really just trying to understand how the world works, how we interact with our planet. Is kind of what all those programs have been about.
In many ways, a sort of a precursor. Of course, there's a lot of angst about the state of the planet at the moment and the environment and climate and so on. But you were kind of out there a good, 10, 12 years ago, banging the drum.
Those are all sort of, quite a while ago.
Yeah.
And it was really, some of the programs I did, like Supersize Earth, was really trying to take a step back, actually, and sort of lift the curtain and try to understand how we got here.
Yeah.
The scale and the pace of human interaction with the planet is just unbelievable in such a small amount of time.
Yeah.
And so all my programs really have been to do with that.
Yeah.
Really looking at the kind of the human planet.
That's right. Let's then go right back to the beginning, if we can, Dallas.
Okay.
What sort of things were you watching as a child? Do you remember what used to excite you as a
child? I mean, we're the same kind of age. So
I'm much younger.
You're much younger, and I'm 35. So you're very young. For me, I grew up watching TV, not like our kids who don't really watch TV.
Yeah.
I grew up watching 4 TV channels, but mainly the BBC, and I grew up watching Tomorrow's World and Top of the Pops, Swap Shop and Blue Peter, and I was slightly in awe of that world of factual BBC programme. I think perhaps things like Blue Peter particularly, I was very enamoured with John Noakes.
Watching the Daredevil.
Watching John Noakes climb Nelson's column and do the Cresta run. And I just had that. And I thought, well, one day I'd quite like to be John Noakes. I think that would be a good job.
Yeah.
And then realised that it was taken by John Noakes. But it took me kind of a while to get there. I thought, I'll go and be an actor for a while. And I probably wasn't very good at that. And then I went into television presenting, and I found that a lot more me, actually.
Yes.
And then tried to become John Noakes. And kind of succeeded a little bit.
So, but you kind of took the long way round in a way, didn't you?
Yeah, so pretty much.
We know you then primarily as a presenter, but as you mentioned there, you had something of an acting career.
Yeah.
Was that a bit of a side step, or was it your intention to stay on that track, or were you always thinking about presenting?
It's a good question, actually. I think in the back of my mind, I always had that presenting thing. I thought I'd be better looking down the camera than not looking down the camera.
Try to not look down the lens.
Yeah, exactly. But I had actors in my family, and I thought, that looks like a bit of a caper. That looks quite fun.
Yeah.
And actually, my great uncle, who's no longer with us, long since no longer with us, was in the third Indiana Jones film.
Wow.
He played the old knight, chose wisely.
Yes, fantastic.
And I went down and hung out.
Incredible.
And spent time with him. And through him, actually, I got really into acting. He was a kind of old Shakespearean actor, but I really was sort of quite enamoured by, not even the acting, but the kind of the circus comes to town. Trucks and cameras and lights and being on set. And I thought, this is great. This is fantastic.
Yeah.
And sort of movie stars and that sort of thing. So I went to university and studied drama. I thought, I'll go and do that. And also I'm not a scientist, by the way.
Yeah.
This is even though I present science programs, I present science programs because I love science.
Well,
but in the same way, I love music, but I'm also not a pianist.
Right.
So I was never going to go and be a scientist. So I studied drama and then left university where I studied drama and then went straight into a TV show. Called Spender with Jimmy Nail Lake.
Remember it well.
Castle.
Yeah.
So I did that. And then
You've just offended half of our viewers, by the way, but, with that terrible accent.
Sorry.
But it's okay.
So I did that and then moved to London. I thought, right, I'm going to be a movie star now because I'm doing TV shows with Jimmy now. And then the phone never rang again.
Right. Yes.
And so
probably on account of your accent.
Probably on the account of that.
Yeah.
I remember. I had to set fire to Jimmy Nail. I remember having to douse him in petrol.
My
and
God.
then set fire to him. That was my acting debut.
Wow.
Yeah, it was good actually.
Yeah.
But it was quite exciting. So when was this? Late 80s, early 90s, about 1991 this was. And then, I came to London and then faffed about for a decade.
As you do.
Working in Pizza Hut and doing nonsense.
And
And then life happens, stuff happens, other opportunities come along,
Yeah.
you go down that path rather than that path. I am still acting though, a little bit.
Are you now?
Well, not kind of. I get called up every so often. They said, will you be like a TV presenter
Oh, God,
in our drama?
Well, yes.
I did it a few years ago. I did an episode of Tracy Beaker playing myself.
Yeah.
And then I did a bit in The Crown, playing a TV presenter.
Right. How weird.
And I just did another thing called Slow Horses. Have you come
yeah.
Playing a TV presenter. So,
great. Hardly a stretch then, really.
It's not really that much of a stretch. Anyway, so that's quite fun. Yeah.
So you mentioned a few things you used to watch growing up there, Top of the Pops and Tomorrow's World and so on. Nary a mention of any Gerry Anderson shows.
Sorry.
But,
Well, I was thinking about this actually, and just coming in and seeing your picture.
Yeah.
I used to love Space 1999.
There we go.
And I had no idea that it was Gerry Anderson until about 4 minutes ago.
Aha! Interesting, isn't it?
And I have a very, very early memory, particularly of Martin Landau.
Yeah.
Who was terrific.
Yeah.
And seeing Martin Landau, just his face was sort of imprinted in my brain.
Yeah.
As was that spaceship, which
That's
I used to
the eagle.
The eagle, which I used to draw. And my friend Johnny Matthews had a die-cast ship.
Classic.
And I remember he got really cross because I put plasticine in it.
Oh, Dallas, you don't do that.
No.
Wow.
His mum trying to get it out.
Yeah.
So that was my first Gerry Anderson.
Well, of course, and you wouldn't really put two and two together from Thunderbirds to Space 1999 under the same umbrella because, of course, one was live action and one was the puppets.
And which one was first? Which was
Thunderbirds was 60s.
Yes, okay.
The Space 1999 70s.
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah.
But also UFO, you may remember. That was another Gerry Anderson live action.
Yeah, but I remember going back to sort of early television. So I would watch, and you would watch probably. You'd come home from school, there'd be play school at like 4 o'clock.
Yeah.
And then it would be something like Captain Pugwash.
That's it.
Then it would be Blue Peter, and then a bit of John Craven's News Round. I don't remember Thunderbirds in that. I think we had to turn over to BBC Two sometime in the 1980s, perhaps. Yeah. They had a whole... Because I do remember watching Thunderbirds.
Yes.
But I can't remember where it kind of fit into sort of the children's television world.
Now, it's very interesting because we are, as you've admitted, of a similar age. And actually, I think my experience is similar to yours in that I didn't grow up watching these shows, Thunderbirds, Stingray, all the old puppet stuff. Yeah. But I do remember Space 1999.
Yes, exactly.
It really did, make a mark on me.
Maybe it was like a Saturday morning.
It must have been, mustn't it? Yeah.
Because I remember, Swap Shop was a really big deal for me. Like, Swap Shop was massive.
Yeah.
And they would have things like Valley of the Dinosaurs would be on that.
Right,
I just remember, did they have any Gerry Andersons?
I can't remember.
So it's there.
Yeah.
Thunderbirds there particularly.
Yeah.
Space 1999 and Martin Landau definitely.
Yeah.
And then beyond that, it's a kind of warm, fuzzy, kind of slightly opaque.
Well, we're going to put
memories.
That to the test.
Yes.
Right now, Dallas. Because we're going to play a very silly game called Super Identification.
Okay.
I'm going to play you some very brief clips of the opening titles of every one of Gerry's 18 TV series. Okay, they're very quick, so you've got to watch out.
What do I do? Do I shout out?
When you see one you know, shout out. Ready?
Yeah.
Okay, here we go. Well, this is 1957.
Oh my God, The Adventures of...
Yes?
Ivor the Engine. Not Ivor the Engine at all.
Number 2. I mean, I doubt you'll know any of these early ones.
Oh my God, I don't know any of these.
I know, it's extraordinary.
I'm really sorry.
That's okay. You're letting no one down.
Stingray.
Okay, hold that thought.
It's not Stingray.
Yeah, but hold that thought.
Oh, look at that beautiful moon. Reminds me of Chesley Bonestell. Well, this must be Stingray.
That is Stingray.
Stingray's underwater. So
that's it. You'll know this one for sure.
Thunderbirds.
There we go.
Okay,
there you are. See?
That's the one I know.
You might even know this one. No. Any of these hiding in your memory anywhere?
I'm so sorry.
No, please don't apologise.
I love Stanley Unwin. I know Stanley Unwin.
Now we're into the live action series now, so after this one you might...
Space 1999.
There you go. There you go.
I'm going to get 2, aren't I?
Well, you've already got 3.
Have I? Emergency. Who knew that he had so many of these?
Extraordinary, isn't it? We're into the 2000s now, so we're almost at the end.
Right across the
Space Precinct.
Well, I mean, that was previous, but
was it?
I mean, I'll give you that. That's the new Captain Scarlet.
Captain Scarlet, that was the one I was thinking of. Damn Captain Scarlet.
Dallas,
I have heard of Captain Scarlet.
I think you mentioned Space Precinct a little out of time.
Did I?
But
they all did. They were too quick.
I know. That's
very
the point.
quick. Okay.
No apologies. Everyone who's sat in that chair has been put through the same thing.
Okay, fair enough.
Okay,
yes.
So we're not going to make any special...
How many do I get? 2, 3.
You actually got 3.
Okay.
I mean, I'm not going to give you Space Precinct because you said that way after.
Okay.
All right. And I'm playing harsh. 3.
Nice.
There you are.
Okay, terrific.
You will go.
Oh my God,
you will go somewhere down this end.
Okay.
Yeah, this is the second time we've had to replace all these because we've had a lot of guests who, some of whom have done very well, some not so well. So don't be ashamed of that.
Okay.
Now, the reason I thought it might be great fun to have you along, Dallas, is firstly because we go back quite a way, and I thought it'd be nice to see you.
Yeah.
But secondly, you are kind of a living embodiment of one of the Tracy brothers.
Which one?
The international rescue from Thunderbirds.
Oh, okay.
Who travel the world in extraordinary craft, diving down to the depths of the ocean and burrowing down through holes in the ground and climbing buildings and, well, there you are. That's you, isn't it?
Doing stuff.
Yeah. Have you got, this is one of those impossible questions, have you got a standout moment? The one thing that flashes up in your mind that sort of epitomises everything you've done over the last few years?
I don't... oh, crikey. It's difficult, really. I did a series called Super Size Earth, and it was a 3 1-hour series for the BBC, and it was basically looking at how the world works. How does modern life function? Was the sort of premise.
Yeah.
And we went everywhere. And it was one of those shows that, I mean, it took us 3 years to make.
Wow.
Pretty much.
3 episodes, 3 parts.
3 parts.
3 hours?
Yeah, 3 1 hours. And it was just mega.
Yeah.
You know, and it started off with, there was a little clip on top of the sort of Burj Khalifa. We thought, well, why don't we start there? Why don't we stop on... Actually, it was quite funny because we had this idea, Nat, the director, had this idea, which was, we'd seen Mission Impossible. And we thought that would be why don't we, start on the tallest building in the world? And we'll do like a piece to camera. We'll have a helicopter going around.
Yeah.
And that'll be amazing. And, and from there, off we go. This is why it took 3 years, because the BBC legal department said, no, you can't go up to the top of the Burj Khalifa.
Right, health and safety,
and all that. So you can go halfway up, or 2/3 of the way up. There was a kind of viewing gallery 2/3 of the way up, and we were like, this isn't going to work. And anyway, months. This is why it took 3 years. Months went by.
Yeah, I see.
Nat, I remember trying to talk them round, and we were like, well, how are we going to? Because we'd look rubbish if we go 2/3 of the way up.
Yeah.
And Nat, without telling anyone, flew to Dubai. He got a meeting somehow with the Crown Prince of Dubai.
Yes.
I forget what his name is, Mr. Khalifa.
Yes.
And explained this series. He said, we want to talk about, the wonders of the man-made world, and what better place than your iconic building. And, we want it to be the kind of the crowning image of the series. And, he was sort of really big up and charmed.
Yeah, lovely.
And he slammed, the prince slammed his fist on the table and pointed at Nat and said, you, sir, shall go wherever you want. and so Nat was back on the phone to the office saying, we can go to the very top, And the lawyer, no, you can only go to... So eventually,
come on.
So we just did it anyway.
That building is so Gerry Anderson. I mean, I cannot tell you the amount of Thunderbirds episodes that would have a building like that. Yeah. Normally, there's some jeopardy involved, so there would be, it would collapse or it would be in danger of collapse.
I think he's pretty prescient, Gerry Anderson.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at where we're going now. You look at things like Starship. The new Elon Musk book. It's straight out of Gerry Anderson.
Yes.
It's like class. I mean, it does look like.
Yes, the eagle and what have you, that's right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It looks like the future. So.
Yeah. People often email us in when there are world events unfolding, like the miners trapped in Chile, if you remember.
Yes.
And they had to send down a Plan B, I think it was called. And also the children trapped in the Thai cave, all got out, thankfully. People say it's like a Gerry Anderson series. It's like an episode of Thunderbirds. It's international rescue.
Well, it's drama, we're obsessed by drama.
Yeah.
And very often the fact and fiction tends to kind of...
That's right.
News events and events generally and technology tends to kind of bleed into it.
Yeah.
And just the way we consume media, it's very drama oriented. There is something to be resolved. There is something that needs to happen.
Yeah.
And so we're kind of living in a kind of when Elon Musk talks about living in a matrix, he says maybe we're living in some kind of computer simulation. Maybe we're living in a Gerry Anderson series.
Could be. No, I've done that. I have lived in.
You have done that.
I've done that. But the extraordinary thing is, you're living in occupying very similar space in a way. Gerry Anderson, imagining the future, and on your work on things like Bang Goes the Theory, and even the Gadget Show, you weren't just imagining the future, but sort of seeing it unfold in front of you. I mean, the Gadget Show was what was happening around pre-iPhone?
It was really interesting time, actually.
Pre-iPhone and smartphones and so on, wasn't it just about, or was it around about that time?
Exactly around about that time. In fact, we just did a reunion Gadget Show the other day, actually, and it because I joined in 2007, I think.
Right.
Which is when the iPhone came out.
Right.
And it kind of, in a way, that changed everything. The iPhone and smartphones and apps and social media, which was just starting. Yeah. Suddenly the landscape completely changed.
Oh, yeah.
I remember doing, when I was doing Bang Goes the Theory, which was a BBC kind of science magazine show, a bit like Tomorrow's World. I remember doing a piece about early AI with the guy who runs Google DeepMind, like before Google DeepMind exists, and I had to play Connect 4 with this, and of course it destroyed me. But this was in like 2009. And even then I'm like, holy crap! Can I say holy crap? This is. I remember at the time thinking, this is either just going to be a neat trick, and nothing will happen and it'll be forgotten. A robot can beat me at Connect 4, or it'll completely change the world.
Were you conscious in those moments that you were effectively Michael Rodd marvelling at a new CD player. Or
that's exactly it. So whenever I do any television, I channel Noakes, Rod. I've got Noakes there and Rod there.
Yeah.
So for younger viewers, Michael Rod used to present Tomorrow's World with Raymond Baxter and
Maggie Philbin.
Maggie Philbin, who I work with now, bizarrely.
Yeah.
And weirdly, Michael Rod went to my school.
Right.
So I was aware of Michael Rod as an alumni of my school, bizarrely. So yes, and William Willard as well. Do you remember William Willard?
Oh God, yes.
Okay, I used to love William Willard, who was the Tomorrow's World. He was quite tall and quite sort of laissez-faire and rather charming.
Yeah.
And actually, when I first moved down to London, when I was an out-of-work actor working in Pizza Hut, a friend of mine rang me up and said, "Oh, do you want to earn 100 quid?" I'm like,
I'm there.
And I didn't even ask what it was. It could have been it could have been something terrible. But he said, "Oh, we need to clear out William Willard's office and throw some things into a skip. Can you help?" So I dutifully went to West London, and William Willard was moving out of his office, and we had to throw a load of crap, clear out this office, old furniture and stuff. And I remember finding a box of VHS tapes and old books on space.
Yeah.
All kinds of, which I still have.
Yeah.
And I remember there was a couple of VHS tapes, and they said, "Growing Up in the Universe." That was all. Didn't say anything else. I thought, I'll stick those in my bag. I nicked a whole load of stuff from William Willard's office. And then about 10 years later, I actually stuck them in a VHS player and watched them. And they were Richard Dawkins, actually, his Royal Institution Christmas lecture.
Okay.
And I remember being absolutely spellbound by that. I'd never really considered biology and science really as a thing, and thinking, this is terrific. It was a sort of young Richard Dawkins when he was sort of rather handsome and spoke very clearly and beautifully. So anyway, yes, all that kind of stuff percolating in the background.
Yes, but that was really the spark, was it then?
I think so, yeah.
Interesting.
And then I did a play in the mid-90s with Ken Campbell, who was a comedian, and you all know Ken Campbell, lunatic. And I did a play called The Warp. Lots of interesting people were in it. It was people like Diane Morgan was in it, and Alan Cox, and lots of great actors, lots of people that you'll know. And Ken at the time was doing a Channel 4 science series called Reality on the Rocks, a kind of comedy science series, which was basically Ken trying to understand quantum mechanics.
Right, great.
And hijinks would ensue. You know, so Ken would get, and he'd sort of gone off and interviewed Stephen Hawking. And anyway, I remember watching that, and I was working with Ken at the same time, so I was talking to Ken, and I was sort of helping him a bit with this. And I just thought it was the most brilliant idea. Get someone who's absolutely rubbish at science, Ken Campbell,
right,
and do a kind of finding out show rather than Professor X telling you stuff. And so basically, I sort of nicked that as an idea. So, why don't I do that? Why don't I go on a sort of odyssey and try and understand things? Dallas tries to understand things. And so I wrote a program which I made in America, which was kind of my first foray into factual television.
Incredible. You mentioned Pizza Hut there. Which brings us rather neatly to your first
it's in
Anderson
my DNA.
memory, which you very kindly share with me. So let's have a look at this.
Hey, can we turn that music down a bit?
Oops, wrong button. What now?
Now we
hit the hut.
Oh God, it actually makes my...
Proustian.
Yeah, I've had some Proustian thing.
Yes, John?
Hey, guys, you haven't forgotten about me, have you?
Coming right up.
For a Thunderbirds meal.
Hit the hut.
Hit the hut. God, do you remember that?
Of course I do.
So when was that? Like early 90s, mid 90s?
I think so. I think I did a Klingon commercial for Pizza Hut.
Did you?
For a Next Generation Star Trek Pizza Hut tie-in.
I think that Thunderbirds must have been on in the 90s. On
For
TV,
sure.
on like BBC Two.
It really was. That was the kind of rebirth. Well, it had several rebirths, but that was when Anthea Turner was making Tracy Island on Blue Peter.
Exactly.
And all that stuff.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So, tell us about Pizza Hut and Thunderbirds.
I used to work in Pizza Hut, and I was, and every so often they'd have tie-ins with whatever was happening.
Bit of merch,
and they had Thunderbirds drinks cups, with toppers. and on the top there'd be all the different space
I think we
ships.
can see one, actually.
Have you?
Yeah, let's take a look here.
Let's have a look. And we were very excited by this. There it is, 1490. They're quite a lot. On somewhere in my office, somewhere where I clear, I'll hire some young intern.
You will. That's right. Just,
and they'll find lots of these. Anyway, these are the Pizza Hut cups that we used to have to distribute, but we didn't distribute anything because we nicked them all because they were really good. Particularly that one. That was the kind of the best one.
That's Thunderbird 2.
Thunderbird 2.
Yeah.
And I remember we were threatened with instant sackings and dismissals if any more. I've got quite a lot of Pizza Hut stuff.
Fantastic.
Probably shouldn't say that. A lot of Thunderbird cups still somewhere. And other things.
Yeah, right. Fair
anyway,
enough.
So that was my first proper memory of Thunderbirds. And not my proper memory, because I remember it before
Sure.
But that was my first interaction with it. That was my visceral thing.
That's right. You'll recognise this, of course, in Space 1999. There's Martin Landau.
Yeah. Why was Martin Landau so ingrained in my childhood memory? As opposed to anyone else, any other actor.
It's funny, isn't it? I mean, likewise, him and Barbara Bain, his real life wife, played Helena Russell in the show as well.
Okay.
But yes, there is something about this show. To me, it looked like the future. It was all very sterile. The white walls and the.
Yeah, and I think for us, because we were too young to see something like 2001.
Yeah, that's right.
And they're very similar. If you look at how they, the sort of mise en scene of 1999 and 2001, and only 2 years apart.
Yeah, quite.
They do look very similar, but there was definitely something.
Yeah,
and also, when that was on, when we were kids, early 1970s, Apollo had just happened. So we may not have been in our consciousness because we were very little, but that's what humans did. Humans went to the moon.
Yeah.
That was normal for us when we were born.
Yeah.
Now it's like totally weird. And we don't go to the moon anymore.
Yeah.
But back then, and so yes, I was very enamoured with the whole.
And how disappointing to actually get to the year 1999 and beyond, and we're not on the moon, and we're not exploring the far reaches of space.
I remember at one point during an episode, I don't know how old I was, working out. Oh, crikey! Okay, it's 1973 now, whatever it was. I worked out how old I was going to be in 1999. I'm thinking, oh my God, I'm still going to be alive probably because my mum's.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll be really old in 1999, ancient. So there's a chance.
Well, now we're probably just as far beyond 19. I won't do that to you. But in this box, we have some questions that our viewers and listeners have sent in. So if you want to dig in there and just take 3 or 4. And we'll answer them this week, and then we'll have a few more next week.
I haven't looked at these. You did give me an opportunity.
No. It's always better to go in cold. All right.
Okay, shall I have a look?
Yes. Let's see.
Rich Goodborn. Hello, Rich. Hi, Dallas. Big fan of the Zero X spacecraft in Thunderbirds.
Oh, yes.
And always felt its concept was something that should be made real. What technology from the worlds of Gerry Anderson would you like to see in the present world? So remind us what Zero X is.
was a spacecraft from the first Thunderbirds film.
Yep.
And I think it's the first ship to go to Mars.
Well, isn't it interesting that it's called Zero X? And given that when we think about spacecraft now, we think of SpaceX.
Right.
And going to Mars, we think about SpaceX. This is how we're going to do it.
That's right.
And I think during the Space 1999 time, I knew we'd been to the moon. Mars seemed the next logical step.
Yeah.
And I was always very disappointed, and still am disappointed, that Mars is still a long way away. Like, we are not going to be going to Mars anytime soon.
Yeah. It's always had such an allure, though, isn't it, into science fiction writers and actually to scientists and space enthusiasts.
Well, it's the nearest planet that we could feasibly get to, that looks a bit like Earth. In fact, it looks a lot like Earth. We knew it had water. In fact, we just found water on Mars this week, actually, deep down, like liquid water, which is exciting. So that possibility of life is always there, even if it's life now, it's possible.
Yeah.
Certainly, are there sort of fossil bacteria there?
Yeah.
So Mars has always been part of our consciousness as the next place on the horizon that we should go to. Rich, to answer your question, what technology from the world of Gerry Anderson would you like to see in this present world? Probably that. I mean, I think
a ship to Mars.
A ship to Mars, which is that was Elon Musk's entire raison d'etre, if you like. Sorry to bang on about Elon Musk.
Yeah.
You will have opinions about Elon Musk.
Yeah.
So we will.
Park
opinions aside about Elon Musk and Twitter and that. But actually, just as an engineer, when he left PayPal in whenever it was, 1999, I think he left PayPal. He got ejected from PayPal with a big bonus, so he had a couple of $100 million payoff. And he could have just retired to Tracy Island or wherever. But he thought, okay, well, what are the things that we need to do? We need to make human life sustainable on planet Earth, so we need to get away from fossil fuels, and we need to make space a multi-planetary species. And so everything from that, he put half of his fortune into developing SpaceX. A guy called Robert Zubrin, actually, who runs the Mars Society in America, which is a big Mars advocate group. How are we going to get to Mars? You know, NASA and the big government organizations do not have a vested interest in human beings getting to Mars. It's expensive. But why don't we do that? And so that was Musk's entire thing. Was okay, go to Mars. And not just Musk, lots of other people. Buzz Aldrin was a big Mars advocate.
It's looking likely, isn't it? It's looking not imminent, but
we can go to Mars. I mean, it's that thing where wherever there's a will, there's a way, but where there's no will, there's no way. So it's just, if we decide we want to go to Mars, we'll go to Mars. We send rovers to Mars. There's all kinds of spacecraft on Mars at the moment. In fact, Mars is entirely populated by robots. It's the only planet that's entirely populated by Gerry Anderson looking craft. I mean, you look at Curiosity rover. And all these other things. They could have very easily come off Gerry Anderson's palette.
Another question.
So yes, Mars.
Definitely.
Okay. Morty Vicker. Hi, Dallas. Hello, Morty. As an aficionado and accomplished explainer of science and technology, you probably appreciate the place of tech in the Anderson universe. From all your travels, which really world city would you say is the most Anderson?
Which real world city is the most Anderson? Interesting. Now, is it Singapore with those huge
Singapore. I have been to Singapore. Those weird kind of mushroomy kind of things.
That's right.
This is the thing when we sort of build cities now. Because we have computer technology, we can design things in simulations and we can model things and we can build however we want. In the old days, when you had to build like a pyramid, you just had like a lump of rock, and basically that's the kind of shape you're going to get. When you throw a lump of rocks together, that's the kind of most economical shape. And, you know, that's fine. But you don't get a lot of internal space in a pyramid. And then as you get more efficient in making stone, you can do things like flying buttresses, and you can create cathedrals, and you can create beautiful buildings with internal spaces. But actually just the kind of revolution of materials of the 20th century means that buildings like the Burj Khalifa, which is a masterclass in pouring concrete and glass, and you can build a needle a kilometre high. That's pretty Gerry Anderson. So probably kind of Dubai. Is going to be up there. Singapore up there. You know, Saudi Arabia. You know, they're building the city in a big long.
That's right. That's really odd. The Line is
the Line. That's crazy.
Yeah.
I spent a lot of time in China, actually, and spending a lot of time in Shanghai. And Shanghai is one of those cities that just, it didn't exist. I mean, it did exist, obviously, but it was a small fishing port.
Yes, that's right.
You know, and in the space it took me to kind of put up one bathroom cabinet, you know, from the year 2000 to now. You know, they've built this entire kind of Gerry Anderson like city of the future. It's just incredible. I mean, the pace of building in China, certainly, you know, a decade ago, I don't know, I haven't been for a few years, but it was just extraordinary. I mean, they would build road networks. You know, the length of time it would take us to widen one junction of the M1. They'd completely linked all of China, rural China to the cities. But, you know, they do things differently there. But anyway,
time for one more, I think. And
okay. Dom Riley. Hi, Dallas. I remember when you presented Airport.
Oh,
yeah.
Right.
With Dan Snow and Anita Rani. Some memories.
Memories of Airport.
I remember.
This was a live. Was a live early evening?
Yeah, it was Airport Live.
Right.
And it was sort of 3 days at Heathrow, behind the scenes. And we'd sort of a bit like Springwatch, but
not the most glamorous of jobs, I wouldn't think.
Well, it was. If you like airplanes, which I do, and that kind of engineering is great. So it was great working with Dan and Anita. And actually, me and Anita just used to make each other laugh, and I used to draw rude things in her script. That's my main. That's my main thing. I would do little rude doodles.
I can imagine.
Hastily scrub them out. It's my main memory of Airport. Actually, there's one thing. I remember I had to close one episode. I was the sort of thank you, good night, see you tomorrow. And I remember what we were doing. We were painting a British Airways plane, and the story was, how do you paint an aeroplane?
Okay.
And it was all painted, but I had to put on the serial number of the plane, like the registration number.
Right.
I had basically a stencil.
A massive, okay. Like a
big
decal.
stencil. Yeah, exactly. It was like a stencil, and then you put a roller on, and you
literally like making a model and you put it on the. Wow.
But we were running out of time, so in my ear, I had the gallery going, "Get on with it! You got to." Honestly, we've got 10 seconds. So I remember doing that and putting the paint on, and then they pulled the plane back, and I just put a huge smudge of paint down of blue paint.
Goodbye.
And it was that. I was like, "Thank you, good night."
Great.
And it was awful. And all I could hear was lots of chuckling, and the very angry British Airways paint man because the flight had to go somewhere anyway.
Brilliant.
Hilarity.
I mean, should we broach this now?
Well, we could, given,
I understand, and I think I must have known this in the past, because I've known you for quite some time, and I'm sure we would have spoken of this, but you auditioned for Space Precinct.
I did. Now, I remember when
94.
Was it? 94.
This would have been.
Pizza Hut time.
Absolutely right.
I definitely remember getting a call and going up for the audition for this new Gerry Anderson. Wow, Space Precinct.
Yeah.
And I heard there was a buzz about it. Other actors were going up for it. And it must have been before I knew you.
At Pinewood? Did you go to Pinewood for the audition, which is...
Yes.
Do you remember? Yeah.
Or I went to some studio.
And did you meet Gerry? Do you remember? Was Gerry in?
No, I don't remember. Anyway, I did the audition.
Yeah.
Or I read with someone.
Yeah.
And it went really well.
Yeah.
And I got a call from my agent saying, "You're on pencil," which is the kiss of death.
You're never going to get it, yeah.
But
actually, in those days, it kind of did mean you were close.
But there were gradations of pencil. If it was like a light
heavy
pencil and then heavy pencil,
I know.
There's all different kinds of pencil.
Ridiculous.
But anyway, so I sat by the phone and waited and thought, this is going to be it. Finally, thank God, I'm going to get like a proper regular gig.
Yeah.
And I waited and I waited. And now it's 2024, and I'm still waiting.
It could still happen.
It could still happen.
Fingers crossed.
See, that would be amazing. Imagine if it did happen.
Oh, well, yeah,
Imagine if
absolutely.
that happened.
Oh,
like
too
suddenly,
right.
whoever cast it, who's the caster? You knew the caster.
I think it was Rebecca Howard, I think.
Rebecca Howard.
Yeah, that's right.
Imagine if Rebecca Howard called me today and said, "Oh, sorry, just
You're on.
You're on."
Sorry about the delay.
Yes.
Just had to sort out a few legal things, but we're on.
Exactly, yeah.
How extraordinary.
Yeah.
So, I mean, in
Yes.
another universe, you could be sat here interviewing me.
Yes. In fact, yes.
Had you done your time on Space Precinct?
Exactly. There is a universe where that's happened, according to the Copenhagen School of Quantum
So there
Mechanics.
are universes where anything could happen, I
The
guess.
multiverse.
Yes.
Isn't that, I always worry about that. You know, there's a sort of universe very possible branching off. But that's kind of the conclusion of modern physics, which is a bit weird. So, so basically there is a universe somewhere.
I find that quite a comfort.
And I'm slightly better than you.
Not in all of them, you're not. Not in this one, you're not.
There's also a universe I'm slightly worse than you.
I think there are plenty of those.
And all gradations
That's
in
right.
between.
But anyway, let's not talk. Last week we discovered that although you professed to have, a little knowledge of Gerry Anderson, actually we discovered that it was kind of woven throughout your life in some ways.
Yes.
You mentioned Space 1999 last time, and that, of course, the famous Thunderbirds Pizza Hut commercial and so on.
Yeah.
But also in your life and career, the places you visited and the things you've seen and the things you've done put me in mind of some of the exploits from Anderson shows, particularly Thunderbirds and International Rescue and so on. Did you ever, or were you ever able to say no to these things?
No, I wasn't. It's such a... it's funny, actually, because we didn't make these kind of programs as much as we did then.
Absolutely.
These sorts of big, ridiculous kind of scale documentaries just don't happen.
Yeah.
I mean, some of them do. Obviously, the Attenborough ones do. But no, at no point did I think, no, I'm not going to do this.
That.
It was only ever, holy moly, this is exciting. We're going to go to Mexico and they're going to dive into a sewer. It's going to be great. Or we're going to go to China and I'm going to swing off a bridge or whatever it might. Or we're going to go to watch rockets being launched.
Yeah.
So no, never. It was only ever a massive privilege.
So your career as a presenter and I'm not going to use the phrase, but you know what I mean.
Science communicator. You must communicate the science.
Did that sort of come side by side? Obviously, part of the remit of being a presenter of the stuff that you presented is that you are communicating.
Yes, of course.
But now that sort of spun off into personal coaching, training.
Yeah, I mean,
appearances at various shows.
I do lots of on-stage live stuff.
Yeah.
So I work at Farnborough at the Air Show.
Yeah.
Lots of stuff in the aviation and space industry.
And
so I work with the UK Space Agency doing their podcast and all kinds. So I'm still very connected.
And
to
do
the
you
world
find
of
yourself using some of those old tools that you used as an actor, or is this now purely presentational? Is it different somehow?
No, I think that's a really good question, actually. And it's funny, I'm talking to other people, like Maggie Philbin, we mentioned last time. Maggie was one of the presenters of Tomorrow's World. And she began as an actor.
Right.
She went to drama school as well. James Burke, who you'll know, who I used to love. James Burke used to do an engineering series called Connections and did all the Apollo things. And James, like me, wasn't a scientist. He came from, actually he was teaching French he was teaching French to students in France. And someone came up to him and said, you look like you might be okay in front of the camera.
You look like a boffin.
We'll get you. So people sort of go into it from very sort of different areas.
Yeah.
And actually, having worked as an actor has been really helpful. I think partly because there's sort of confidence, knowing your kind of way around a set, like understanding kind of how it all kind of works, that kind of stuff. Yeah, it certainly didn't do me any harm. Yeah. And my whole remit wasn't about I have lots of knowledge, I will tell you stuff. Yeah, mine was always about I don't know. Let's go and find out this kind of stuff together. Yeah, and I think it was a good model. So yes, I mean the acting definitely helped. Yeah, I mean I'm never not me. Yeah. But also even things like kind of learning lines is really helpful. That's right. You will be somewhere. I remember being in America. I was doing a thing about the Drake equation, about is there life? And we had to catch the flight at 4:00 and it was 2:00 and the sun was going down behind this hill. And we had to get the, high pressure stuff. Yeah. You've got to get the line. You've got to say that bit, otherwise it's not going to make sense. Yeah. And actually being able to deal with that, being able to kind of write the script, learn the script, say the script, coherently. That's right. It's just the kind of basic mechanics of making television is actually, it was helpful actually having done acting. Yeah, absolutely. And sort of confidence as well. Yeah.
And also another string to your bow is as an author.
Yes.
I mentioned this briefly last time, Ad Astra, an illustrated guide to leaving the planet. Yeah. I should also mention that you do own a replica Apollo astronaut.
I do.
Spacesuit.
I do.
How did that come about? I can't remember.
Well, I remember being about 10, and I remember being dragged to some stately home, and I can't remember what it was, where it was, and being really bored. And I remember at the foot of the big grand staircase, there were kind of two suits of armour. Oh, yeah. I remember thinking to myself, what would be really cool would be if you had two spacesuits. Oh, yeah. That would be really cool. And I was always quite enamoured by the Apollo spacesuit. I just thought they looked really cool. Yeah. I just thought they looked great. There's something very iconic about those Apollos. When you see news clips about Apollo, you'd see sort of Buzz Aldrin standing there. And actually, you're looking at a manufactured object. You're looking at a piece of engineering. The spacesuit is the kind of the smallest possible spacecraft designed for one person.
Yes, right, yeah.
And I was always very interested in them. And so, I sort of collected them. I had a few. I've had some real ones knocking around. Oh, yeah? Which I passed on. Yeah, I had some of the Soyuz suits. I had a few of those. I had one of the orange. In fact, I had Charlie Bolden's, who was the NASA administrator. I had one of his shuttle suits for a while. And now I've got, one of the Apollo suits. It was made by Ryan Nagata, who makes suits for all the big movies. Okay. I've got a replica, one of his.
Would it work?
No.
But it looks great.
Well, you'd look good as you died in the vacuum of space. You'd look great.
Tell us about the premise of this and how this came about.
Well, the premise of that, it was a Douglas Adams thing, actually. I remember Douglas Adams, I can't remember which, but it wasn't in one of the Hitchhiker books. It was an essay he'd written. Yeah. It was kind of a guide to leaving the planet. Okay. Call NASA, call the Pope, whatever. Yeah. And I just thought, actually, that's a rather good idea for a book. Why don't I do like a sort of rough guide to leaving the planet?
Yes.
And I can talk about all the things that I've been making programs about.
That's right.
And that I'm interested in. Yeah. Which rockets to catch, what spacesuit to wear, what to eat, all that kind of stuff. And so it's kind of, that was the premise. And then it's slightly morphed into something a little bit different.
Yeah, sure.
But that's it.
Excellent. Very good.
So if you want to get off Earth, Although it's a bit out of date now. That's the problem writing about space.
That's right.
It dates
all this is
within a week.
It? Yes, that's right.
Well, it's a lot of history in that. I'm very interested in space history.
Yeah.
The history, and I'm doing another book at the moment, which is again about the history of space flight from the kind of Greeks through to the Jacobean space program, through to now. So
the Greeks, you say?
Yeah. Well, I'm sort of looking at the Space 1999, and this idea. In fact, the picture I'm looking at here.
Yeah.
If I can just turn it around to show you that, a human being standing on the surface of the moon, looking at the Earth as a globe.
Yeah.
This is an image that long before we ever went to the moon, we had imagined. And you can go back to the sort of 1600s. There was an English bishop, Bishop Francis Godwin, who imagined geese would sort of migrate from the Earth to the moon, and he could construct some kind of craft. A bit like James and the Giant Peach, some kind of seat.
Right.
And so he wrote about all these kind of lunar adventures. And lots of writers and scientists would fantasize about these and have different ways of...
Sure, yes.
Cyrano de Bergerac would imagine having sort of bottles of water strapped to you, and as the water evaporated,
it would take you up.
Yeah. So
okay.
There's some really great stories. Yeah. And then, of course, eventually there's kind of science and the technology could have caught up with the imagination, and then we actually figured out ways that you could do it.
Yeah.
But I've always been interested in that as a sort of cultural idea.
Yeah.
So yes,
nice.
So that's what I'm writing about.
Very good.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we have more questions here for you, Dallas.
Yeah. In fact, that orange, he's wearing an orange spacesuit, and that's the orange. Did they wear orange in 2001? I can't remember. But the orange spacesuit became a thing during the space shuttle.
Yes, that's right.
It's called International Orange is the name of that colour. Yeah. And it's called International Orange because it's the least occurring colour in the natural world.
Right.
So it's designed to, wherever you end up in a forest in the ocean,
you're going to stick out.
You'll stick out. So that's why that orange is orange.
Very interesting. There we go.
What am I doing?
Now, there's some more questions here from our viewers and listeners. Take them all.
Take them all. Did I leave one?
That's it. No, that's it.
Okay.
Yep, there you go.
Hi, Dallas. This is from Paul Hyder.
Oh, yes, Paul Hyder, yeah.
Hyder. Hi, Paul. Hit us with the most mind-blowing science fact you know.
Wow. Okay. Right. Off you go, then. Perform for us, Dallas.
What's the most mind-blowing science fact? God,
I've got one.
What's your one?
I'm not even sure it's true.
What?
That's the trouble, isn't it?
It's
about the whale. It's about the whale. Blue whale, of course, is a mammal that lives in the sea.
Yeah.
But evolutionarily speaking,
it
started life in the sea, as we all did.
Yeah.
Crawled up onto the earth.
Yeah.
And became a kind of wolf-like creature.
Yeah.
And then went back into the sea and became a blue whale.
Yeah, that's great. I like that.
It?
It sort of went up and go, nah.
Yeah, do you know what? I tried it.
It's not going to work.
No.
It's not going to work for me.
Back in the sea.
Yeah. I like that. I heard a fact the other day. I don't know if it's the most mind-blowing fact, but I rather like it. If you... Okay, just if you look at me straight ahead, there's another evolution fact.
Okay.
And then what I want you to do, without moving your head, move your eyes all the way to the left or the right.
Yeah.
And then just smoothly move them all the way back to the middle and all the way to the other side.
Yeah.
And you'll notice that you can't do it smoothly. Can you feel your eyes jumping?
Yes, I can.
They saccade. We call it saccade.
Okay.
They jump.
Yeah.
Jump. Now, that's interesting. Put your finger in front of your nose.
Yeah.
And this time with your head still.
Yeah.
Move your finger left to right, and let your eyes follow your finger. And you'll notice your eyes will move absolutely smoothly.
Yeah. Okay. What's that about then?
Well, basically, it's an evolutionary thing, a bit like your wolf and the blue whale. But obviously, if you are on the savannah, lots of information is coming into your brain. And when your eyes move about, you're actually sort of temporarily blinded. So your brain kind of edits what goes in. But if it sees something moving, your eyes will lock on. Because obviously you don't want to get eaten by the thing that's moving. Yeah. So your eyes will move smoothly.
Okay.
But only on moving things, because moving things can be bad. Moving things can mean...
Yes.
So that's a little mind-blowing. You can try this at home.
Like it. Very good.
Yeah.
Well done. Yeah.
There you go.
Excellent. Another question?
Okay. Why was that in my brain?
I don't know. It's funny, isn't it, what sticks?
Alex Pass. Hello, Alex. Hi. Do you have a favourite example of science in fiction, either workable in real life or completely ludicrous? For example, the reusable Thunderbird rocket, Space 1999, blowing the moon out of orbit. Well, I suppose...
Does it bother you when you see things that couldn't
No,
possibly...
it doesn't bother me at all. So, it's a good question. So The Martian, for example, the film The Martian. The Martian. Everyone's, it's really accurate and da-da-da. I don't care. What I care about is the film any good? And The Martian really annoys me. I just don't think it's very good. Nothing to do with the science.
Great book, though.
Well, it might be a great book, but my problem with it is Ridley Scott. So Alien, I love Alien.
Yeah.
And there's a big difference between Alien and The Martian. Because in Alien, the whole last third, you've got Ripley trying to get off the ship, and it's beeping and it's noise. She doesn't say anything. There's like no dialogue. And we, as the audience, do the work. We're with her. And with What's His Chops on Mars, and he's just constantly talking and narrating this kind of exposition.
Yes.
But you don't have to.
Well,
it's much better if you just turn the sound down and just watch him. Because we understand what he's doing.
Yeah.
We don't need him to do like witty space bands talking about disco music. Oh yeah, makes me really cross.
Okay, fair enough.
Anyway, so that's but reusable rockets. Actually, Alex, that's a really good point. Reusable rockets. So Thunderbirds, they have reusable rockets.
Yeah.
Reusable rockets is the way that we will not conquer, that's the wrong word, but we will explore space. The problem with something like Apollo, or the problem with rockets up to this point, is that rockets are massive, and the only bit you get back at the end is the tiny little bit at the top, and the rest is disposable. It is akin to getting on a jumbo jet in London, flying to New York in it, and then setting fire to it every time you wanted to fly. It makes no sense. It's completely unsustainable. Economically, it doesn't work, which is why we stopped going back to the moon. There was no economic, it was too expensive. The problem is, the actual real engineering of rockets is very, very difficult. Unbelievably difficult. And we can go into the rocket equation, we can talk about the maths, why it's so difficult. But it's only the last 5 years or so that we've been able to do it, thanks to SpaceX, actually, thanks to Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, and others, and the people who work with them, that we've actually been able to work out how we can do it, how we can bring up boosters back and reuse them. And because we've got computers, much better computing power that lets us model things so we can do it. But it's really, really difficult. And actually now we're at a point where you look at other launch companies that don't use reusable rockets, and they look like sort of dinosaurs. We're so used to watching the SpaceX Falcon 9 boosters kind of landing and stuff. That's unbelievable. It's unbelievably hard. It's taken us a long time to do it. But that is the key to making going to Mars, if we want to go back to Mars. We certainly couldn't do it without reusable rockets.
I'm going to throw some Gerry Anderson things at you now. Things that were established in his series that were kind of ways around problems when they were making the shows. And let's see how much scientific validity they have, for example. So in, I think it's Fireball XL5, to get around the fact that the puppets were moving in space without spacesuits, we had them taking oxygen pills. Could such a thing ever happen?
Well, you can sort of engineer humans somehow, like to not be. No, I don't think so. Although there was, I'm trying to think which film. There was an old film in the I want to say the sort of 1920s, or maybe the 1950s. I can't remember which one it was, where they showed the astronauts taking motion sickness pills. They must take the motion sickness pills,
right?
Because even though before we'd been into space, they knew that you would probably get space, which they do. All astronauts, they do. They take pills, stop them vomiting everywhere.
Gosh.
Because that's what happens when you go into space. But not oxygen pills. But again, those are the sort of things that, as a viewer, I wouldn't mind.
Yeah, you just buy into it.
If I'm watching that, I'm like, as long as your film is good, if you're taking an oxygen pill because that's the thing, then it works. And if you watch things like 2001, you've got spinning spaceship in order to recreate gravity, because obviously you don't have the technology to show people floating about. We do now, but back then you didn't. So you have to come up with creative ideas, and I always like those creative ideas. I think they're good. So why not oxygen pills? Probably not going to cut it. Although the Abyss.
Well, I was going to mention the Abyss,
which isn't Gerry Anderson.
But they take the fluid into their lungs
your. It was a kind of
they breathe it.
A sort of saturated, oxygenated gel.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, that could. Could work. But I remember seeing that, thinking that is brilliant. And also the kind of fear of that sense of drowning as that moment where you have to kind of give in and sort of breathe the liquid.
Terrifying.
But, you know, when we were in utero, that's what we used to do.
Yes.
Breathe
I
out,
don't remember that far back.
I remember. Not you.
No, that'd be weird. Retrometabolism. Captain Scarlet dies and comes back to life. Every cell in his body is regenerated.
Yeah.
How far along the line are we to eternal life and cells regenerating in perpetuity?
It's one of those things that scientists have been going on about since, you know, the sort of transhumanists and the cosmists in Russia at the time, and this idea that somehow we can, at the moment of death, kind of freeze yourself and then sort of regenerate yourself later. The problem is cell damage. Like humans, we're really quite fragile, and so we don't quite have the wherewithal to do that now. Yeah. Certainly with kind of simple life, you could probably do it, but with humans, it's probably not there yet. Maybe at some point. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if we can figure out a way of doing that. Yeah. I mean, we do regenerate. Yes. I mean, all the cells in your body and my body are not the same cells as when we were born.
Yeah, that's right.
I don't think.
No, weird.
I think we have regenerated. But
finally, here's a controversial one for Thunderbirds fans. Yeah. Would Thunderbird 2 ever actually fly?
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of got a lifting body. You know, you don't need wings necessarily.
Aha.
You know, just the shape of a body will give you lift.
Okay.
And there's nothing, you know, if you look at something like the F-35, it doesn't look dissimilar, to Thunderbird 3. I think. Yeah. It's slightly wide, small wings. Yeah. Body does a lot of the lift, just like Thunderbird 2.
Yeah.
I think it could. Why not? Yes,
problem solved.
Answer, yeah.
Fantastic.
I mean, you know, you could test it.
No, Dallas. Let's have a few more questions before I show one final clip.
Okay. I like these questions.
Good.
Neil wants to know, Neil Owen, hello, Neil. Hi, Dallas. Where do you think the human race will be in 100 years' time? I think in Slough.
Yeah, probably still doing this interview, I would think.
And what will survive from today for our future descendants to marvel at? What a great question. 100 years, it's not that long.
But a lot's happened in the last 100 years.
Well, that's the thing. We do seem to be on this kind of exponential curve. I mean, growing up in at the end of the second half of the 20th century, technology was, you know, the change from kind of records to tapes to CDs. That was kind of like... Yeah. That sort of took a long time.
It did.
And they were kind of monumental.
That's right.
And then suddenly everything's gone really quickly.
Yeah.
And I think that, you know, we mentioned AI very briefly in the last interview, but I think AI is going to change, not just AI changing things, not just AI in itself, but AI will embed itself within everything. And so everything is going to change unbelievably quickly.
Yeah. Is it okay to be a bit scared about that?
Well, medicine, I mean, good things, you know, medicine. Yeah. The fact that we'll be able to design climate models beyond anything that human beings can do will be terrific. You know, space, materials, things that, big things will be pumped along by AI. And miracles will occur as a result of that. But then you have the flip side of that. Everything bad will be amplified even worse. Right. So good things will get better, bad things will get worse. I think, I don't know, I'm amazed. I mean, I've been sort of following AI from the beginning, and I remember playing Connect 4 with a robot with AI, and being amazed at that. Yeah. But I'm amazed how quickly we've got used to already things like large language models, how quickly within a year or 2 years, we all just use ChatGPT or whatever just because it's really useful. Right. And I mean, I use it all the time for all kinds of things. Yeah. And it's really good. Yeah. But it will fundamentally change humans in a way that no other technology, I think, has changed humans before. Wow. It's not just the Industrial Revolution. I think it's, you know, the internet connected brains together, and that was a revolution. That changed everything, as we know. But suddenly, bigger brains, exponentially bigger brains that are bigger than human brains connected together, I think is going to be quite profound. And, you know, what it'll look like is we can spend the rest of lives discussing. But anyway, so I think in 100 years' time, people will go back, wow, imagine how did they cope just using their own puny human brains?
Well, it's a good question.
They'll probably be talking about Thunderbirds.
Almost certainly.
But actually, the thing that I think will be valued 100 years from now will be humans, the things that we can do which aren't perfect. So, for example, in art, we like to see the brush strokes. We like to see the thumbprints in the clay of the bust of the artist or whatever it is, or the fret buzz of a guitar in a piece of music, even though it's not perfection.
Yeah.
We like the rough and readiness.
Yeah.
And I think that the human imprint within culture will still be of value, even if it's perhaps not useful, in big inverted commas. So
that's a comfort.
Yeah.
I like that.
It's why we like things like Thunderbirds and Gerry Anderson, is because it's not perfect. It's not a perfect rendering of humans.
Yeah.
We can see the strings,
Yeah.
and we don't mind that.
Yeah.
We like that. There's something about, that sort of lo-fi-ness in art and in culture that is comforting and important.
Yeah, great. Nice.
Yes.
Let's have one more.
Okay, so that was my rather
take
long...
a choice. I think let's have one more of
answer.
those.
Sorry. Steve Bushell. Hi, Dallas. How well do you think we are on recruiting new Tintins into STEM subjects? And what can we do to improve this? By the way, I saw you presenting a talk in Bexhill a few years ago.
There you go.
And you were fab. What was I doing in Bexhill?
Oh, I don't know.
Bexhill on Sea.
But it must have been a hell of a night.
The thing is, in a seaside town with James Burke a few years. Maybe that was. I hope it was, because James is terrific.
So how well are we doing at recruiting future scientists and enthusiasts, would you say? Could we do better?
Well, we can always do better. I mean, we've certainly, since I've been kind of involved in science and education, there's definitely been changes. It's definitely got better as the culture has changed. I mean, I remember, 20 years ago, pushing more women in science, more women in science. That's completely changed. I mean, obviously we need more everyone in science. I'm still on a bit of a crusade in terms of, I want science just to be part of culture, not something separate. I don't want anyone to ever ask me again, wait, you make science programs, but you're not a scientist, as if somehow that's weird.
Yeah.
The fact that is weird to some people is a problem in itself.
Yeah.
Because nobody would stop you coming out of a cinema and going, you were seeing a film, you must have filmed it.
Yeah, that's right.
It's like,
yeah.
But
I see you're eating, you must be a chef.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And I think it is changing. I think certainly technology, maybe it's just the kind of circles I'm in, but certainly technology has become such a big part of our lives. But I want people to see it as something that's fun and interesting and worthwhile, and not just a subject.
Yeah. Well, you've spent a career trying to get over that very message. There was a time when you were in our living rooms once a week, I think, on Bango's a Theory.
Bango's Theory, yes.
Let's have a look at
I love Bango's Theory.
A look at a clip of that, then, and then we'll say goodbye.
This kind of answers your question. The reason we did this show was because the BBC, it was Jay Hunt who became controller channel of BBC One, and she was like, we need to have science back on early evening family viewing.
Yeah, right.
Because if you want to get people interested in science, if you don't have things like Tomorrow's World, if it's just what you do at school, then it'll forever just be a subject.
Yeah.
And actually, it's more than just a subject. This is what humans do. We're scientists and we're engineers. And
this is
Brendan. I remember Brendan. I love Brendan. Brendan's great, by the way. You should get Brendan.
Okay, right. I'm making note of his details. And this sort of program doesn't really exist at the moment. Do you think it's a cyclical thing that perhaps someone else will have that exact same idea in a couple of years' time?
Definitely. I think, particularly places like the BBC, it kind of goes science, history, and it's kind of... It's sort of space, dinosaurs, Egypt.
Strictly.
Space, dinosaurs, Egypt. Strictly. That's the thing. I mean, the trouble is, broadcasters, they've got their bottom lines. They want viewers. But, I still present Sky at Night on the BBC, which I think everyone's just sort of forgotten about.
Not at all.
It's like one of those kind of, they call it sort of legacy programs.
Yeah.
But it's really important. But the problem is, kids don't watch TV anymore.
Yeah.
This was, we were making this in whenever it was, 2008, 2009. It was before Twitter and everything else, really before social media took up. I mean, my kids, they're grown up now, but they didn't grow up watching programs.
No, true. That's right.
So
yeah, there you go.
So it's unlikely that,
yeah.
The BBC, they still do good science. They do, I was going to say stargazing, but that's finished. Spring Watch and programs like that. So there is still good stuff on. But yes, I missed Bang. Bang was a great show.
Yeah, it was a great show.
It was a proper family gang show where we sort of muck about and do interesting stuff.
That's right. Yeah. Well, it's been something of a roller coaster having you along, Dallas.
Well,
do you see what I did there?
I did see what you did there.
But thank you very much for making the effort. It's been so nice to see you again.
That's great.
It's great to talk to you about your life and career and time.
We haven't talked much about Gerry Anderson, so I apologise.
That's come back and do it all again.
Okay, thank you.
Lovely to see you.